is there any like best practice you want to pick out from those and share? And then the third section, Phil and the other teams provide us with basically the error types and their frequency in the different councils. So we sort of compared those and matched them up. It's quite interesting. So we can talk through that as well and talk about what sort of the big errors are and if there's sort of a way we can eliminate them and those sort of next steps quickly at the end. Does that sound good? Good sort of plan. Awesome. So project recap. I'm going to zip really quickly through because we've got lots of good content actually we want to go into. We thought basically there's three sort of motivations for why we wanted to do this project. One, leadership don't always get the right information. They don't have everything they need to know to make better decisions. There's a gap there we want to try and fill. Two, data quality is clearly a pain point for analysts, but also it does hinder analysis and it creates sort of it erodes confidence in analysis. And three, we think that actually if we did things in the same way, collected data in the same format, then we'd be able to share analysis and insights and tools much more effectively. So I think there's a big opportunity for more councils to work on a sort of common way of collecting data. And of course, 903 already does that to some extent, but we think it's very painful to produce and it doesn't always have the right stuff for leadership. So two sort of major goals for the project, therefore. First of all, we want to understand what information decision makers really need. How they make, what decisions they make, how they make them, what information have they got at the moment, and what is the stuff they would really like but they haven't got currently. And two, we want to understand how to more efficiently get higher quality data together, so particularly in the 903 process. And today we're going to focus entirely on that second one. So we're going to do nothing on the first one, and then in the next session we'll focus on the first one. So today all about data quality and the 903 process. This is a discovery project. So our aim here is to find out what sort of big user needs are, but not to build anything. So in alpha we might build a sort of simple prototype, and then we go forward to beta with something that's actually sort of working, and eventually a live product. So that's sort of a long-term roadmap. In terms of timelines, we're sort of approaching, we've got 4.5 weeks left of the project. We've done loads of data collection and stuff so far, and we're now entering this phase where we've sort of collected all that and we're sort of bringing out the insights. So now we're into this quite rapid sort of, hopefully, getting insights out, discussing them and turning it around sort of phase. So I think we'll sort of, feels like we've taken our time to collect stuff now, but now we're sort of kicking into gear and going. So we've got another show and tell in 2 weeks' time. So I see our sort of our time sort of speeding up a little bit over the course of March. Adam, do you want to talk us through sort of what our process has been so far?
Sure, yeah. So we have done a bunch of interviews with different people in local authorities and with different stakeholders, and we've also done some quantitative analysis with the error reports from case management systems, which has been great. And that collected a ton of kind of raw information and scripts, and we as a team went through those scripts and that data and kind of picked out the key themes that were coming through, and then highlighted kind of what we thought were trends in both local and across local authorities, and also with the data as well. And we've been able to kind of pinpoint some kind of key findings or recommendations that have come from that process. So I guess also thank you for setting up all those interviews and being so open to having us talk with you and sharing your data.
Yeah, it's been actually been great engagement so far. And Phil in Stockpot as well, and Michelle have been really, really helpful.
So these are the interviews that we've had to date. We've done 19 interviews so far, and we're going to do 12 more over the next few weeks to kind of finalize the project up. As you can see, it's a range of kind of positions, and it's given us this really comprehensive view of what's happening with 93 returns and data with looked after children.
We've also published our first blog as well. So this went out yesterday. All of your smiley faces are there. And so this is something we're going to hope to do sort of weekly now going through the project. As we've got to get sort of findings phase, we'll start pumping stuff out so other councils can get sort of their feedback and see what they think of it. But we're going to keep it pretty short and light. We'll aim for a couple of 100 words and a few pictures. This first one's a bit longer because we're sort of explaining the project. But we'll try and hopefully get into a nice weekly rhythm there so we can get working there more. So data cleaning in 903. So data quality, basically, I think there's sort of three things you can do about data quality. Either you get a really good process for cleaning data, which has got some errors in it, or you reduce the errors at source, so there aren't errors, or the third option is you decide this is not the right data, we want to collect different data because this is not important enough, or it's too full of errors, or whatever. We're going to talk about the first two today, and then the third one is sort of a bit more long-term, a bit more about the common data model, and perhaps about advice to the DFE. You know, that could be, we recommend to the DFE that this certain data field is not that useful, it's very painful, so maybe we could remove it. Or for our own internal common data model, we might want to pick out a subset of the 903, which is really useful for decisions that we can produce on a more regular basis. So we're going to look at these first two first, and first of all, we're going to talk about the data cleaning process in each of the three councils.
So we spent some time with all of you learning about the 903 process and how it works in each different council and how data cleaning works, not just within the 903 process, but throughout the year as well. And we then mapped them out for each different council and kind of tested them and validated them through follow-up phone calls. So we're now going to talk through briefly each one and then kind of talk through a general one, just highlighting where you do things similarly and where things are different. And as we go, if you could just write on sticky notes anything that seems like good practice to you, whether it's from your own council or from a different council, doesn't matter. Just write down as many things as you think would count as best practice. So just do that throughout the next few slides. Okay, so this is Wigan's. The main thing with Wigan that was different is that they have this very in-depth data cleaning process throughout the year, but that is equally quite time-consuming and involves following up, chasing social workers, a lot of chasing people. But that was a big thing that was different with Wigan. They also find that we heard that uploading to the test schema in February-March, when the DFE releases its test schema, can be very frustrating because they've got simple things like headings wrong, and then the analysts have to report back to DFE that they've got this wrong. The error fixing process, we have more details on the second map, which is a map of the year-round error fixing process because it's pretty similar for the 903s. And this is, as I said, quite an in-depth process, quite time-intensive. So these are kind of the basic sections, and these repeat in every council. So the...
Can you guys read that from there? No.
Okay,
we've got some printouts as well. So
we do. We'll stick
too.
printouts up around the wall.
Liz, does that sound right about Wigan? Have we got you right?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, Michelle talked through it last week, didn't she?
Yeah.
I think the thing we probably need to get better at, so although it's probably like a bit of an intensive year-end cleanse and a lot of that's already written and it's just a case of running some reports, one thing we probably need to be better at is making sure that that's followed through in action, and that although we're doing all that work, that it's not still coming up at year-end. I'm probably not as clear as I should be on whether that's having a big enough impact for the resource that we're putting into it as a team. I've just this morning had a meeting about this in census, because obviously collect's open at the minute, so we've got the error count coming through for things like that. We've got some big chunks in about 4 areas where they do get an error report. We run a big one in November for that particular piece of work, and we're not quite seeing that translate through into an improvement. But at the same time, we have had quite a bit of staff turnover and agency staff, so we know that impacts on what's going into the system at the front end. So, other than that sort of bit of QA and of making sure that it's making enough of a difference to warrant the results.
Cool, thank you. So in terms of the process for throughout the year, it's quite complex, but essentially, so social workers enter that. I won't read through every bit of it, I'll just try and summarise. So you have these business object reports that run every night from the data that's inputted by social workers into Liquid Logic, the CMS, and you run these reports every night, which kind of, some of them automatically identify errors, and other ones analysts have to manually read through and notice things from their own knowledge of the case notes, and that can be quite time consuming. So that's the first red dotted box. All the red dotted boxes are pain points. We then have the business support team having to go back and forth between social workers. Another pain point, social workers or business support having to come back to analysts to understand more about the error if there's confusion. And then having to log a job with IT to make amendments for them. IT in turn having to kind of log jobs with Liquid Logic, because there's some things that they can't do and they have to get Liquid Logic to do it for them, which can take a long time. And then quality assurance. Again, this was a difference that Wigan had that we didn't really see in the other authorities as much. Quality assurance comes in at a more high-level approach and looking at if there are big errors that come up really often, and they'll think about like the workflow and reasons behind this error, and potentially get management involved if needed, and try and redesign workflow processes. Liz, does that sound about right?
Yeah, I mean, it looks a little bit more complicated than it probably is, and it's because we sort of sit in 3 different directorates. So we've got our system maintenance of Liquid Logic is done in our IT application support team, whereas I know other people have got that in their own teams. Then we sit corporately, and then our QA function sits within children. So it probably looks quite convoluted because it looks like there's a lot of back and forth, but actually it's probably a bit more seamless in practice because although we're not as part of the same sort of setup, we work really closely together. There's some really basic stuff in the data quality bit as well that isn't specifically related to the 903, so it's things like where we know a field should be filled in and it's blank. The scheduled reports every Monday or every month that go out, we don't do anything with them, they're all automated. We just go straight out to service managers and say, you know, you've got this kind of fields where there's no data birth. You know, some real basic stuff to keep the system as clean as we can be. Not specifically related to the 903, but obviously would have a massive impact. And then there's the specific stuff that is the error that will come out of our submission.
The Liquid Logic charge you for cleaning the data? If you look at IT ratings, what do they do as part of the normal contract?
They don't charge us specifically, but nothing usually gets done. It'll be in a future version update, or so it happens that way. It's very rare that we get a hot fix. We've had one in the last 12 months related to the CIM, and that Craig and I were talking earlier. Some of that can be about the version that we're on with Liquid Logic. It might be fixed in a future version, but because we're not operating on that version, we need to put something in to allow us to do the return. So it does differ, but it tends to be on the whole that it'll be in a future version. We do raise it in a future version. I mean, we raise things through the online forum. We've got the Northwest user forum, so we raise stuff that way as well.
I thought an interesting learning for me on the Liquid Logic point here was, I mean, it seems that it's having more structure, more controls on social workers is helpful for reducing errors. But then the flip side of that structure is that when you want to fix an error, it's a really painful process. So, in some cases we've heard about we have to do these sort of rollbacks and basically copy out the last up to 18 months of data, delete it all, and then re-enter it again. And this requires going back to Liquid Logic, and it takes sort of up to months to do. So in the worst cases, it's actually quite painful to fix errors with Liquid Logic.
Rollbacks are mainly done by IT application support on kit, unless they're a specifically complicated one. We've been talking about this quite recently because we went live with early help in Liquid Logic about 12 months ago, and we're investigating it at the minute for group work, for EHCP plans, and for our Start Well centres. And one thing that rollbacks mean is that if that person is having any interaction with any of those services at the same time, it rolls everything back, as I understand it anyway. So you would have to roll it back in all bits of the system, not just the social care bit. So they're going to have to decide what their stance is on rollbacks, and some of that moving forward. But it's a big resource on both IT applications, but we don't do any rollbacks, we just advise, and it's a big resource on the admin staff to then re-enter that case.
Adam's now going to talk through the other authorities.
Great, so there's Manchester's. So with Manchester, it's a bit of a interesting case because they're on a different case management system. They're not on Liquid Logic, but they're transitioning in a bit. And so, like Manchester and Stockport, when 903 portal opens, they upload it and get the initial set of errors. They don't do as much kind of maintenance over the year as Wigan, but they are generating some reports from time to time and sending it out to teams. So when that portal opens, they're getting the errors from that, and they're able to do some initial kind of shifting with SQL, the analysts, to try and organize some of the errors to make them more clear. But at some point, like any of the teams, they have to start working with social workers and data quality teams to make the fixes. And I think whenever you start involving, one of the challenges with this whole process is it's quite human-driven. So it requires a social worker to go in and make a change in order to rectify the situation. And if you have maybe hundreds of those errors, that's hundreds of conversations, and that's a lot of time for everyone. So that's one challenge. And the MyCare system is difficult to the case management system is difficult to kind of use, and the packages don't work as well. So they end up with some errors that they have to write amendments on or things like that, because it's challenging to make those changes with the DFE portal. But overall, it's a simpler process than Wigan because maybe that's someone from Manchester can say. I personally think it's because the case management system doesn't require the same type of rollback intensive, like error fixing is just a little bit easier for the analysts and data quality teams to manage. They don't need kind of the case management system to get us involved to do big changes. But it'd be interesting maybe to hear from Manchester what they think about that in a bit.
Yeah, that's all right. We do sort of send data quality spreadsheets out automatically through the year, but they're not specifically in relation to the 903.
Yeah.
They'll just be like where data births are missing or missing care packages, where we record where the child's placed, things like that. They go out automatically, so to Stockpot and the Wiggins as well.
Yeah.
But it's only when we sort of enter into the 903 complete stage that we're sending specific errors out
Yeah.
in relation to it.
Yeah. And that makes sense. And sometimes it can be hard to get teams to really act on that data if there's not some sort of pressure. And I think the 903 returns process adds that pressure where you have to clean it up to get to a certain level to submit it properly. So that can be something to think about from a process point of view. Throughout the year, how do you maintain data accuracy when you don't have that pressure? So those are the mains with Manchester, and we'll come back to that in a second. Did I just go backwards? No. With Stockport, they have a similar kind of process where they are generating kind of year-round reports, but it's not as quite as focused. And then when the portal opens, they're submitting the data set to the portal, they're getting their errors and it's grouping the errors. They're seeing if kind of the queries, SQL queries, are going to work with that schema for that year for the DFE. And the analyst starts to group the errors and make it more organized. But then again, they have the same kind of challenges as Manchester, where they have to work with business support and social workers to fix the errors quite often. And like again, that's a very time-intensive process. And then they check to see if those errors have been fixed by resubmitting to the portal. And if they have, then great. If not, they go back through the process, and they can do this up to 15 times. So it's just quite time-intensive. And I think a lot of that's limited just by the way maybe permissions around the data and knowledge. So the social worker has ultimately the most amount of knowledge about the case and is able to make the changes, but they're also a very busy individual who probably doesn't prioritize 903 returns on top of their day-to-day crisis management with their caseload. So yeah, just jumping along. Any questions on those two before we get into the kind of summary slide on the three, comparing them all? No?
We don't necessarily have this right yet as well. This is what we sort of understood so far. We've had some good conversations going back and forth with Phil, for example, and with Stockport Phil arriving as well. But this, I think there's still probably things in here which aren't quite right. So we can maybe look for a bit more detail later, but it's good to get your views on that. I mean, Craig, did that sound about right for the Stockpot's
I think
process?
so, yeah. I guess we have some error reports, but like we can do. I just don't know if people are kind of as bought into them. So we have to put a lot of, we have to kind of remind people quite a bit to look at those. You can track the errors through the year. Get to the stat return process, they come down to pretty much zero.
Yeah.
And they just go up and up throughout the year.
Yeah.
Maybe like it might be the other occasion where we have kind of a focused period where we'll kind of go through it a bit later, but it'd be interesting to know how perhaps how you've done it, if you're more strict with people and how you get that buy-in. I think you're meeting with Laura at some point.
Yeah, tomorrow.
Tomorrow, brilliant. Yeah, so Laura will know a lot more about kind of details.
Yeah. An interesting, I suppose, sort of difference between, I think, Wigan on one side and Manchester on the other side is the Wigan process seems to be a bit more social worker driven. So it's entirely about finding the errors and then sending requests out to social workers with information, asking them to fix it. Whereas Manchester and Stockpot seem to do more sort of the analysts fixing and finding the fixes. So working, I think this is right, extracting a set of data and working and fixing errors in that and keeping track of it and testing it as a DFE portal until they're sure that they've got the errors fixed, and then afterwards asking social workers to go back and fix it. So Stockpot and Manchester are a bit more analyst sort of driven, and Wigan's a bit more social worker and sort of business support sort of driven. Does that feel accurate?
It doesn't. There's probably a reason why ours is like that, because in practice we've found that if we amend the extract without amending the master system, it never gets done.
Yeah.
So if we don't get them to update it as part of the live system, like you said about those errors building in the year, we'll be getting the same errors again for next year's stat return. So in order to keep some validity in the system, we've made a decision that we won't amend outside the system just to submit returns. We do it as part of the live system. But we have had an issue. We had an issue last year with the SIN census and it was the reason why we had the hot fix in the project was to try and get that, and we had to amend the extract and then go back and fix some of the issues for the SIN census, and we were fixing them right up to sort of December time. So I think there's that bit of a pressure, people, social workers are sort of thinking, right, we don't want to be the ones holding this up and not getting it signed off, so we'll get it done. So it gives us the impetus to get it done, really.
Mm.
I think from my point of view, if we went on the premise that it's got to be right on the system and wherever we ever when it that, we wouldn't be able to go with the errors. It just simply take too long for the data quality to sort of act as intermediaries. Between us and social workers, so we do sort of have direct contact with social workers right now. But if we had to wait for them to enter the correct code in the system and realign everything again, I think it would take too long to get the errors down.
Interesting.
Especially because we're such a large authority,
Yeah.
we start with so many errors in the first place.
Yeah.
So perhaps that's a way to might be a bit different.
We do have to spoon feed them. We do have to say, right, this error's coming up, your options are, you should have this code with this code, or this code with this code, which one is it? We don't sort of just leave them to their own devices. We do have to do that bit of, like you said, being that go-between about, this is what's wrong, this is your options for fixing it. But, like we said, and it's in the slides comparatively, we've got lower numbers of lack to other authorities, so that, you would expect that to have an impact.
Jess, do you want to go through?
Yeah, so this is kind of the general process that everybody follows, with differences highlighted. So everyone starts with social workers inputting.
Hi.
So social workers, we're just talking through the stat returns process for the three authorities. Social workers.
Welfare reform? What's it? Welfare reform? No, the boardroom. Ignore me.
You're very welcome to stay.
Okay, so social workers input data on an ongoing basis. Then year-round cleaning process, as we've discussed, we're going to do this, and the other two kind of produce error reports. We don't necessarily do much in-depth cleaning year-round. Then in about February, March, about this sort of time, the DfE released a test schema to upload the data. So everyone does this. And there's a question over whether queries have to be rewritten if there are problems uploading. So I think we need to understand a bit more about that. Then 1st of April, the 903 returns period opens. So analysts upload the data from the CMS, extract it, upload it to the DfE portal. Then there's some automated error fixing that Stockpot and possibly Manchester do. They seem to kind of have their own codes that run and fix some errors automatically. And then initial analyst fixes. So again, in Manchester and potentially Stockport, the analysts kind of go through and fix what they can first before sending it on. And then everybody sends on to business support, data quality, one of those teams who then send it on to social workers. Or in Wigan, they send an email directly to social workers, but copying in business support and quality assurance as well. Then there might be some clarification questions needed. Then we've got kind of the errors are pretty much fixed. The deadline gets closer, and we've heard that in Manchester and Stockport, when the deadline is maybe 10 days, 2 weeks away, the analysts have to step in and manually fix any outstanding errors themselves. So this is kind of interesting to learn a bit more about. That doesn't seem to happen in Wigan as much.
Can I just ask on that, Jess, is that just to clear the errors, or what sort of attempt is made to get the error corrected properly? Or is it just so the system passes?
No, I think it's more that they might have to read through the case notes manually themselves, from what we've heard. So they don't just make wild guesses.
Yeah.
They're still very focused on getting the right information. It's just that then they'll have to step in and kind of read through things themselves and try and get the information themselves if the business support and social worker team hasn't been able to do that for them.
If they're in some sort of placement that's not in our system, they can't be added. Social workers just write things in the note saying the child is placed here, we can't record it properly. So we'll have to go through the system and then enter it that way. So it's that sort of thing. It is usually, placement is usually, with a few exceptions, recorded somewhere. It's just a case of looking through the case notes or at some point on the case management system to try and find it. So obviously we can't get that out of the care, so that's quite a time-consuming thing to do.
Yeah. And then we have this period from in June where the DfE can make queries on data that they think looks potentially wrong, and that might need more checking or more explanation. I think they can write some queries on the portal itself, and then by the end of June, the DCS, the authority, has to sign off saying yes, this is accurate, this is a correct representation of my authority, and it's submitted to the live portal. So, what best practice have you noticed? So we've got a diagram over here where we were going to collect your ideas for what's good and put it on a 2x2, a bit like, for those of you that are at the last show and tell, a 2x2 is just a cross with the upwards, the y-axis is how impactful that would be, so the higher up there, the greater impact this action would have, and the x-axis is how easy it is. So you end up with everything in the top right corner is easy to do and very impactful, so we should do those things. Everything in the bottom left-hand corner is very difficult to do and doesn't have much impact, so we ignore those things. So the 2x2 is over here on the wall where Ollie is. If you want to bring up your best practice ideas and stick them around, we also have the maps for each authority. If you want to look more closely at them, they're just on the tables here. Yeah, who wants to start? Anyone?
Should we all get round and we can sort of stick them up and discuss them as we go? 'Cause
Yeah.
there might be a bit of debate on sort of what we think is easy to do or hard to do. Or
I've got one about, I was interested in the coding that's written to automate some of the more basic error fixes.
Yeah.
Be interested in knowing how we do that and how that would apply to liquid logic.
So automatically fixing some errors with code.
Yeah.
You think it's good practice? Yeah. Cool. How easy do you think that would be to do? Maybe someone from Stockpot My stepping is a bit more. I know this exists in Stockpot.
If there's certain things that we can record in multiple places, we aren't using the 903 reports that are provided by, we use MyCare at the moment. We don't actually use the reports they've written. I wrote the report to make it do whatever I want it to do. So if I think of something where I'm not making it look in a certain place, I just change the code to make it look there as well. It's based on case going on. Trying to get the errors down that way after we reloaded it and hopefully got more information out.
And is that just in your extract or back into the same market or is that back into the master system?
Yeah.
So is it more sort of fixing extraction type errors rather than
It's
sort
more
of correcting?
it's more changing the script to make it better, so it's getting more information out,
Right.
make it look in different places, do something a bit jazzier.
Yeah. What's an example of that?
So placement postcode, for example, they could record it in a LAC visit. They've got a section where they can write the address there. They've got a front screen where they can record a home address and a placement address. And the care packages has also got a place where they can record the address there.
Yeah.
So I know they made it look at two of those things. I can say, right, make it look at the third one as well. I could decide one place is better to look first. I could change the order in which it does it. Things like that.
Yeah.
So you say that's a relatively simple thing to do to write these codes, or is it?
If you know how to code, then it's pretty simple.
Yeah. Cool. Okay.
And it'd be easy to do it, but it would be harder to do in a common way, I suppose, because it depends on the structure of your CMS.
As I say for Stockpot as well, because we've got quite a bespoke system. A lot of ours is just based on code. There's no standard reports.
Yeah.
So we couldn't really share our methods. Maybe Sheffield we still use it, but apart from that, much use.
But when the three are on liquid logic, potentially there could be a common sort of extraction code.
It's still because you still have your own sort of practice model or because you'd have some commonality in the way that some of the statutory stuff is defined. But we've had a similar to what you say straight away when we have something we have in help where the lead officer can really help with the officer coordinator, or it's done on behalf of somebody else, it's in the coordinating professional. So I suppose it's just comes back to having appropriate and succinct business practices that mitigate the fact that we can keep a postcode in 6 different places and all that sort of thing.
Yeah. In the interest of sort of getting this stuff up quickly, I'll keep my eye on the clock. Should we all gather around and all stick on at the same time, actually? And then we can sort of debate it as we go. Do you mind if we take some photos of you as well for our next blog post? Actively collaborating, working over.
Actively collaborating. That's what collaboration looks like.
Yeah, this is it.
That's already happening. Did you bring the monkey?
No, the octopus. No, we didn't. No. We left the back of the office.
What's that?
We've been tasked by us to find the hamsters, which is supposed to be our stakeholders. So we're going to get. So Maria's going to buy a hamster teddy. So when we find someone to talk to, we make them hold it, take a photo of them.
Run it upside down.
Let's show the group photo.
Yeah.
Yeah,
we've got
that's
maybe-
good. Yeah.
Oh, we can actually use the tripod, couldn't we? So this one.
Oh, we've got another. We can do a live timer. Sounds like a timer.
Yeah.
So just looking at these ideas while we get that sort of set out, we've all gone high impact here. We haven't gone low impact for anything. Automating error reports throughout the year, we think that's pretty easy, pretty high impact.
Do we agree with that? Is that feel right?
Landscape.
Isn't that happening already? Sort of. I don't know if it's automated, but there are some airports.
It's not, it's certainly not difficult to send out automated error reports. What is difficult to do is actually make anyone look at them and do anything about it.
Yeah. Do we believe that's as high impact as we say it is then? Or is it sort of, if you can get people to look at them, then it's high impact, but we should we down a bit?
This is like mine's related to that. Like, so you have these airports, but you have to be able to actually integrate them into like the service management. So that's what I'm trying to say there. So I think the harder part is getting the teams to actually utilize them.
Yeah.
Like having the culture change.
I mean, that's why I put mine there. So I've got cleansing data throughout the year, so it's easy to kind of generate the reports. It's just getting people to like them.
Actually, three of us have got that one. Interesting.
So maybe this is on its own. This isn't super impactful.
But
So
if
you need
you
people
could-
to actually do something with them.
Yeah, if you get those two together, then you've got something really good. How easy is it to get social workers to take more responsibility?
It's kind of like a culture change, really, I think.
Yeah.
So ultimately, do they see if their data as their asset, the leverage, or is it IT's data, device data? So I think if we can evidence kind of the impact of good quality data, kind of what that means for them in terms of making decisions each day, and that will help. But getting buy-in is quite difficult because obviously they're very busy. And, they've got massive workload that's only going to increase. Budgets are shrinking, demand's going up. Difficult on that one.
So we're going to speak to some social workers in the next couple of weeks, so we'll get sort of their view on this as well, sort of how they view it. And I mean, from the ones we've spoken to previously, they don't like entering data. Of course, I wouldn't if I was them. I'm going to move this up to cut the things in half, just so we've got half of the stuff high impact and half of it that's below the line. What else is interesting here? How about keeping the CMS uncustomized so you can get updates on it? How impactful is that? How easy is it? Is it in the right place there?
There's obviously a reason why it's been customised, isn't there?
Yeah.
It's been a difficult one.
What's your reflection on that, Liz? So you guys have got some quite customised logic. I mean, not got some updates, but do the benefits outweigh the downside there?
It's hard, isn't it? Because I think no matter how much you customise the system, even some of the statutory stuff isn't mandatory. The system will still allow you to put those errors in. It won't, you can't, prove the system to the nth degree. You still need to have some level of flexibility. But if if your system stopped you putting particular code in with a good code or wouldn't let you proceed until you've done certain things, well then that comes back to the social worker point. All you'll get then is just people frustrated with a system that they don't understand and can't move past without doing certain things, and all they really want to do is get the case notes in there, get the detail in there, get that signed off by their managers. So it's a tough one really, I think.
I think the design of the case management system itself is the most fundamental thing that can have any effect on the data being got in the first place.
Is that your one in the top left corner there?
No, it's something similar like recording the information right in the first place on the case management system. Well, obviously, that's if the case management system is good, then obviously that will facilitate that happening.
Yeah.
It does come back to business processes as well, though, because no matter how busy the case management system is, if your business processes are convoluted or don't take into account things that you need either statutory or locally, then it's going to fall down anyway. So I think it comes back to having really robust practices, so it's clear and easy for people to record the data that you need or they need in terms of moving forward with the system. And I think as well, some of that comes back to the level of feedback that we get. So obviously with tight resources, a lot of what we do goes straight into the bigger picture stuff, the top numbers, the trend. If they're getting something that's specific to them, to their team or their small group or their geographical patch, it's easier then, like you said, to get the culture going because they're getting something that's specific to their day-to-day. They don't really see the sort of golden thread up to the stuff that we're seeing nationally.
Yeah. It sounds like there's
quite a strong consensus that the best thing to do is to stop errors occurring in the first place. Well, that's the next section of the meeting. I think we thought, looking at it, there was things that were really nice in all three councils' approaches, but there didn't feel like there's anything that's like a sort of silver bullet here. Like Wigan doing this intensive year-round process, really good for cleaning, but it's labour intensive, and maybe that wouldn't work in a council with 3 to 4 times the number of errors like Manchester.
And it's not backed up by any formal training. So if you've got, and the one thing we probably could be better about, although you don't really want to be naming and shaming, is have you got hotspots of teams or particular workers where it's the same people all the time? Do you then go in, and it comes back to that bit we were talking about, like that feedback loop of what we might be telling them, and what do they do with it? And if there's no formal training then given back in how to use your case management system or back to your procedure how to follow that, you're just going to keep making the same mistakes. So I think there's like as Craig said, there's like a workforce element where there's some practical liquid bottom training in some of this as well, or whatever your case management system might be. Because it might well just be that they've got into a bad habit because they've been shown by somebody else who's found a little bit of a workaround, but actually if they did it the correct way, it wouldn't be half as convoluted for them. So,
One thing we tried to do was highlight the errors in reports at the top, to the right corner, so that when you open it, they can that there's 300 of X dates missing, whatever that's happening. Just to try to highlight it and say, like, making decisions on the back of this, but you realise that we need the team to go back and actually key these dates in.
That's really good actually, because we do the two things separately. We don't actually sort of rank rate like a dashboard or report and say, listen, this is your report, but data quality is only at 70%, like, whatever.
Yeah.
It's a handle. So it'd be interesting to do those two things.
So it's had a sort of mixed response. So I think some don't like it at all. They just don't like to see that. They just want us to kind of tidy up. Others are quite keen on it.
Time is zooming by. Should we take a very quick photo and move on to those errors?
Great. Well, here it is. Tripod, magic.
From the last one, there's a really smiley photo that looked really good.
Last
It was photoshopped after.
yeah. Big beaming white teeth.
Unless you want to
Sure,
do
it's that easy.
Yeah, cool.
Well, yeah, I can take one afterwards because to be honest,
we
it's
can
going to be
just
my
talk
project as
about
well. So,
it.
that's what I'm going to say. Is that I'm taking your project and
Yeah.
Everyone come in?
other than anything more you guys, yeah.
No, they have
I need to shuffle in this bit.
Yeah. Also a good one from last time where I'm just behind you, Ed. my face is entirely gone.
Great.
Great.
Thank you.
Nice.
Just keep it there in case we're not taking
Right. So the thing we wanted to talk about next is, having got a sort of feeling there wasn't, I suppose, it wasn't a silver bullet for the 903 sort of cleaning process. What are the different errors that occur at source? What are the different errors that each of the three councils have, and how does this compare? So the guys are really helpful and sent some data over. We've matched it together and have just a bit of analysis to compare the three different councils. So the first thing you notice is that Manchester have far more errors than either of the other two. 3-4 times more than Wigan, which makes sense because actually they've got a lot more looked after children than either of the other two do. Actually, if you work out the number of errors per looked after child for the three councils, first of all, actually they're pretty similar. They're not that different. So Stockpot 2 errors on average per looked after child. Wigan 1.4 or something. So the errors, the differences are not that stark, which I was quite surprised by. Stockpot come out as the highest amount, and Wigan just sort of edged Manchester in to be the lowest. obviously, we're going to do a couple of things different. One, they've got liquid logic, which we think potentially reduces the number of errors, and two, we do this sort of year-round process. Stockpot, talking to Ivan and Phil, the analysts there, their views of the EIS case management system is really flexible, and that brings a lot of errors in. So there's not much sort of control and validation there. So that might sort of explain sort of Stockpot's sort of slightly higher numbers. Actually, if you look at what the different types of errors, most of the errors are caused by just a few common types. So actually, in all three councils, the top three errors contribute about half of the total volume. So there's really big density of very common errors, and then there's a really long tail of very rare errors. So, in Manchester, there's sort of 30 errors which are occurring, most of those actually only once. Sort of very rare one-offs. So there's quite a sort of dual split to it. And of course, that means that if we take out those top ones, then we massively reduce the volume. But potentially, those top ones are also the least time-consuming to fix as well. There's a bit of a balance there potentially. It'd be great and shout out where this sort of makes sense or doesn't make sense here. Because we sent this around to the guys beforehand. We're keen to understand if there's anything we sort of misinterpreted here, we're not quite getting right yet. I think this is perhaps the thing I find the most interesting. Actually, there's not that much overlap in the different types of errors between councils. So there's only, of all the different error types, there's only 14 types which all three have in the middle. Actually, and then there's there's 25 errors that Stockpot have which don't exist at all in Wigan or Manchester. And there's 21 in Manchester that don't exist in Wigan or Stockpot. So actually pretty low overlap in errors, which is really interesting because this is a problem that affects every council in the country, but actually it's a slightly different flavour of problem there. And if we look at that in terms of sort of numbers of actual errors, these are errors that occur in all three councils. So there's 1,500 errors that occur in all three councils, and that's about half of them. About 40% of the errors occur in just two councils, and about 17% occur in just one council. Which this I think is really, really interesting because this means that 17%. Those are errors which the other two councils have completely eliminated. So, for example, it's an error in Manchester that Wigan and Stockport don't have at all. And to me, this suggests that there's quite a big opportunity here. If two of the councils have completely got rid of it, potentially there's a way for the third one to do it as well. So that 17% at the top feels like we could get rid of those. The 40%, that also feels pretty good because one of you guys has already completely got rid of it. The 43% is a bit harder. Those are the stuff that affects all three. But it doesn't mean it's common in all three. It might be it's really rare in one and really common in another one. Is that something that's surprised you guys? It surprised me a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was expecting that.
Interesting. I mean, this heartens me quite a lot.
There is a solution out there.
Yeah, I think there is. Yeah, and there's a solution that we already know in some sense. Some of you guys have done this. This is sort of getting into some of the areas specifically. These are some of the ones which actually are common between the three. So there's a whole set of the top 4 errors. They're all errors which are just comparison between this year's data and last year's data and not matching up. And that's something that affects all 3 councils relatively equally. So maybe a tough one to work on. Distance is not being valid, so that's when there's not a postcode for a placement. That's pretty common in Manchester and Stockport, but non-existent in Wigan, which is pretty interesting. Why is that, Liz? Like, how have you done this magic trick and got rid of that?
I think it's one of our data quality reports.
Okay.
So it would be a missing postcode would be on there. I also think there's an online tool you can use for distances. I think it's a DFE tool off the top of my head. I don't know if anybody else rings a bell with anybody else, but we utilise that. I think it must generally, there's nothing that I can think of that is like you said a silver bullet. I think it's just generally housekeeping on that.
Do you
one.
use liquid logic?
Yeah.
Is a replacement sort of connected entirely? All the placement details are in one place, so it's given the ID of the foster carer, so you would immediately get the placement postcode. There wouldn't be any opportunity for it to be missing, whereas that wouldn't be the case with our case management system.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that would definitely. I mean we don't have the commissioning and financial bit of liquid logic, so the placement stuff is still manually entered in the same way. But that could account, right? Could account for it. If it's a mandatory field within the system that they can't progress without, then you have to check that one.
Yeah, that's interesting. And the same thing happens actually with the next area, which is also related to postcodes as well. Also common in Manchester and Stockpot, pretty rare in Wigan. And the final one there, which is quite common, and these are the most common ones, so this actually is not that much. Date of birth, basically the age of a child being inconsistent with their participation method in a review. Happens in Wigan, happens in Manchester. It doesn't happen at all in Stockport. Do you have a feeling for why that might be, Craig? Or?
Ivan and Laura might know a bit more, but
Okay.
no, I'm surprised at that because, yeah, as you say, our system is very flexible.
Yeah.
Which is why social workers like it. So yeah, I'm surprised at that.
I have a feeling why it's that way in Wigan. I think it's to do with sibling groups.
Okay.
So if you've got, say, an unborn child or a really young child and an older child, when the assessments happen for a sibling group, it can show us the unborn child can show as being seen, for example, when realistically they obviously haven't, but it's because they're linked as part of that sibling group. So that could account for some of that.
Yeah. And how might we fix that?
It came out in the chat that we did in January, so they're on with a mini audit of it at the minute. I'm not sure, it was literally a couple of weeks ago, so I'm not sure what the actions are.
Okay. Interesting. Okay. So those are the most common ones we picked out. These are the most different ones. So Manchester has a decent sized problem with placement provider codes not being valid, which is really rare in Stockport and non-existent in Wigan, which is quite interesting. Phil, why do you think that's like a common one for you guys?
The way organisations sort of foster agencies, residential homes, etc., is recorded on our case management system is just awful.
Right.
It's like sort of 20 different sounding organisations that reflect the same thing. There's like head offices and then like secondary offices. It's just a complete mess.
Right.
It's not all that fixable at the moment. So, and we're using sort of what type of organisation it's recorded as to try and establish what the placement provider code is. Because it's so poor at getting called wires, then we get massive difference actually getting the correct code out.
Yeah. So that feels like something that's maybe fixable with liquid logic implementation.
Yeah, right. Liquid logic and migration across.
Yeah. Interesting. Stockport had a huge problem. A third of errors in Stockport are that there's 2 reviews on the same day for a child.
Yeah.
Which we chatted to Ivan about, and basically his view is it's poor validation in the IES. It lets you enter the same review in 2 different places, so you get a duplicate sort of event.
That sounds right. And also we're implementing the logic at the moment. We've only got a few more weeks until we go live, and we're picking all this up as part of migration.
Right.
So we're cleansing all of that. So it sounds like it's not even an option
Yeah.
in the future. So.
Yeah. So you might get down to actually first place in terms of errors.
Yeah,
So if you
sorry.
take that third out, you're going to get ahead. And Wigan had this big spike of errors. Actually, there's actually just multiple other Ofsted Euro errors. I think it's about 40% in total. We have 40% of Wigan's errors are something to do with Ofsted unique reference numbers for placement providers. It's a huge spike there. Why is that?
with an error, I think.
Right.
I think that we've got, I mean, I think a lot of what comes out on ours is the wrong type of URM being used against a placement code or just an inputting error. I don't think it's anything more scientific.
Interesting. Okay. So because it's new, it doesn't exist in Manchester and Stockport, but it's sort of it's not a really high frequency error there.
The DFE did actually write something quite interesting. Last time we did the 93, they put in the future we're considering only letting you put a URM, and you don't need to bother with the placement code, but just establish it from the URM. So if they actually go ahead and do that, then we can actually help things go on.
Not for us, obviously.
But the good news is, if you take out those 40%, then you've halved your error rate or something. If there's a way to change process or give guidance there. So coming forward, wanted to think about how we sort of get rid of some of these errors. So these are, I've grouped them up actually a bit into groups. I've put all the inconsistencies of previous years in one group there. So this is actually the top 15 errors, which is more than 3/4 of the total volume. And I've listed sort of how common they are. And we've stuck them on stickies at the back of the room. And I thought it'd be good to just spend like 5 minutes and just brainstorm ideas. So we'll go along and look at each sticky for a different error type and brainstorm ideas about how you might get rid of this error in social work practice or in the system or for a different approach.
Can I quickly ask a question?
Yeah.
So obviously we're due to get the test out any day now, really, for the 903, fingers crossed. Are we going to do a quick analysis to like last year compared to this year, and then if there's any significant change, see what we've done in that time to try and mitigate some of
Yeah, good to, And actually it'd be great to get historic data as well to see where you guys were a couple of years ago and if you've taken big amounts of errors out too. So we can do that as the next step. Brilliant. Okay, cool. Yeah, should we spend 5 minutes, grab a set of post-it notes and a pen, and see if we can brainstorm anything that get rid of. These are not necessarily all going to be good ideas. Yeah. Maybe do a quick vote on what we think is good as well.
Do we take some photos of you guys?
Oh, yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, great.
When you say inconsistencies of previous years now, is that we're coming back with specific queries on cases, or is that in general?
Yeah, so specific cases. So sort of this chart had an open review in the end of last year, in last year's 903 data, and then it looks like that's not here, or their placement sort of changes from last year's data to this year's data or something. So it's about 20-30% of errors across the 3 cases.
It'd be interesting to know how long after the 1st of April all the authorities to get data.
You're right.
I'll
just deal with that.
Yeah.
So somebody's coming 28 hours,
Yeah.
and you give them 2 or 3 weeks to get that case up to date before you. It'd be interesting to know if that makes a difference.
Yeah. Well, Phil was saying for some errors, like missing reviews, actually it's just that the social worker hasn't put it in yet.
Yeah.
And you've got to wait a couple of months and then it'll kind of mess some time.
I think that's what I was trying to get at.
Okay, yeah.
Actually, that's the same as one over there, right? Yeah.
That's okay. These are pretty well. I'm just about the same thing forward. Drop down list. Oh, do you? Okay. Oh, right. Interesting.
Not necessarily for that.
How about the inconsistencies to previous 9.3 data? What do you think on that? Because that's a huge one across all three. That's a tough one to think about.
You mean where it compares to the previous year?
Yeah.
There's much.
Yeah, you look great.
It's also quite fun. Quite fun one to fix. Less than one.
Right. Okay. Why is it fun?
I don't know. It's just therapeutic. Going back and
Right.
Is that where like the start and end date for the previous year?
Yeah, I think it's.
So they've changed something this year that affects the previous year.
Yeah,
So
that's
your
really
previous
start
year
date.
times 20.
Yeah, it's wrong. You got to amend previous years. Yeah. Okay, that's a time.
Shall we do a 2-minute round of some dot voting? So if you've got 5 dots to vote for your favourite ideas, go and stick them on some stickies. You can do 2 votes on the same sticky if you think it's really good. So, for example, I think Greg's list of year-end placements or something is a really good idea, so we'll put one dot in it. It's my vote. You've got 5 to give out.
I like that job on this.
Yeah, let's do that then. I mean, this might say it exists. Yeah.
It's definitely a hardest issue.
I'm sorry, yeah.
You told me.
Yeah, I think that's some of my reach, yeah. They're all perfect for me. Just check it. So there's loads of votes on this one here. Why do people vote for this one?
Because it's first.
Cool.
So it was. Oh.
It kind of a lot of an issue on everything, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's the age of social busy, but when you've got cases,
Yeah.
going over 45 days, or reviews have happened, some of it can be a man just not signing it off. It's there in the system, but we can't pick what's in the report.
Yeah.
There's no manager sign off. Convenience held up within ILOs. There's all kind of different reasons for that, but it impacts on every bit of what we do.
Yeah.
Is the speed at which people keep the records up to date.
Yeah. Phil, what do you think about, we know this person's the best, about this as a way of reducing those errors?
Time limits. Yes, one way is it's a good idea. But it's slightly more kicking social workers in to make them record it faster.
Yeah.
It's not something I can do.
Yeah.
Obviously, if you get senior manager, it's try and chase them down.
Yeah.
What are some things you can do in a general sense, or not specific to what you're talking about, so that the project has a more of our app, and we're looking at inputting that in within minutes, so social workers can do things as and when they're out, rather than having to go back to a desk, write a load of notes, then type them into a system, it's there, they're doing it as and when but actually, both families or at least soon after. So there's some things that would help make social workers' lives a bit easier.
Yeah.
It's like tech. If you're from a local authority that isn't keeping, if IT is one of the things you've scrapped out and people have got outdated phones, laptops, stuff like that makes a big difference as well. And there's just the real practical stuff.
Interesting. A lot of projects we found that which have built that trust, which would like to have
Have it, yeah.
lots of the register that handwriting because it feels like it's a kind of
A bit more.
a less formal
Yeah.
conversation.
Oh, I can see that.
Write stuff down. But yeah, ideally, just kill straight in, isn't it?
Do you know if Trafford are tracking their success on that? Because I know they've gone live with a few iPads and stuff like that for their social workers. So if it was something you wanted to find out more about, that might be a authority to tap into, because they, again, were faced with a lot of challenges. Obviously, like I say, want to take notes and all that sort of thing, but they have given a load of tablets out to their social workers. So I don't know if they are tracking the success of that or not.
We
Oh, exactly, yeah.
we have that in Stockpot.
Yeah.
We have tablets.
Oh,
for
yeah,
all,
yeah.
so for all social workers.
Much of it.
Manchester's got laptops for social use.
Right.
Ah, okay, fair enough.
Interesting.
That's
Yeah. Keep my eye on the clock. Got 11 minutes left.
There's one final thing we wanted to talk about with you guys before we sort of round up, finish up. That's quite helpful. So we'll write all this stuff up afterwards, and probably it'll come into a bit of a pack which sort of presents these findings and talks through a few of our suggestions here. And then maybe in our final sort of session together, we can sort of whittle down to what we think is good to maybe to take forward to a next stage, which is part of what we want to talk about in this final bit here.
Great. So we're nearing the end of our workshop. And after spending so much time with our heads in 903 returns, we've come up with some kind of opportunities that we think could have a big impact, but it'd be great to get your feedback on those opportunities, and also maybe do a bit of a brainstorm and see if there's anything that we're missing. We probably are, for different solutions that could improve kind of the experience with 903 returns and make the data more valuable, or make it just easier for the teams to collect that data and deliver it. So I'm just going to talk through them. So the first one would be to, since everyone's moving on to liquid logic eventually, okay, that's not great. Would be to work with liquid logic to customize maybe is the wrong word to use, to clarify the data fields so social workers are able to enter data and have it mandatory and more clear, and so there's less kind of errors for the analysts to work through. We heard that a lot from analysts, that they just wish that there was less errors and that there wasn't as flexible like EIS and MyCare, and they're hopeful that liquid logic would be more rigid so they would have more control over what kind of answers they could get. Do you think that would have a big impact if we were able to do that? Is that right?
It would certainly be a decent proportion of what is there already in terms of the errors. I think the potential problem with that would come back to how much have you Wiganised your system, for
Yeah.
want of a better word.
Yeah.
Um,
So has Wigan already basically tried to do this? Maybe it's a good first leading thing. Have you tried to work with liquid logic to customize and make fields mandatory?
Not in the way that we talk about in this sense, just through the general, this isn't working, get it on the list for future version upgrades.
Yeah.
Not specific to particular data entry issues or data entry process. I mean, that comes back to what we were saying before, that if you do, there's then a cost implication to some of that as well if it's not
Yeah.
part of your contract.
Okay, so there's a cost to customization or to spending time with liquid logic to try and fix it. Okay, that's interesting. So maybe it's like a 3, a 4, 5, 2. 2, okay.
Where 2 is low,
Yeah,
high.
2 is going to be low here, I should have clarified that. So 5 is
Yeah, I was going to say bigger
Yeah.
impact, yeah.
bigger impact, so maybe 3.
Can we go
There
to
is.
them on that? I don't know how it works, we'll have to be easy logical, but if it's a problem affecting
This is one of those things that,
everyone.
yeah,
Take up as GMCA one level as well.
Yeah.
Lots of opportunities.
yeah. This is maybe one opportunity where social finance, this is maybe the next round of our solution creation, where we work with Greater Manchester area and each local authorities to work with Liquid Logic to make sure that we're meeting those requirements on a collective level. So, okay, too. All right, so next one would be to create an error benchmarking tool for councils. So it would allow analysts to see what errors are happening in Wigan, for example, and how that compares to Stockport and Manchester. And let's say if Wigan has 33% of placement codes missing, but Manchester has none, they could maybe talk to someone in Manchester to see what they're doing differently to avoid that error popping up. Would that have, does that make sense, and would that have impact?
If we're using different management systems, case management systems,
Yeah.
see how
I'd agree with that. So let's assume that we're all using the same for that, or the comparison would be in the same.
I think it would be. It's just what's the kind of admin behind that? How much effort would it be?
Yeah.
We press a button, it's done.
Yeah,
And then get a report back.
yeah,
Or how do we?
yeah. I assume you'd have to upload your error reports to like almost like a portal that probably we would create or someone would create, and then it would probably quickly give you a comparison between the different local authorities that are using the same case management system. So I guess the challenge would be to kind of have the error report, get that together.
It's that useful when you've got like things like trends. So you've got another area, a similar error profile year on year, but last year, for example, they don't. Something's changed.
Yeah,
And then you want to talk to them about that and find out. That's our number one error.
yeah,
It was your number one error, but it's now
yeah,
no longer an issue. What have you done?
yeah.
So that'd be really useful. Yeah.
Okay, interesting.
Interesting if we could in some way put a judgment against some of those errors, so that, like, say for example, if we know in Wigan it's because of the system or it's because of practice, so then Stockpot might say, well, actually we have that error as well, but it's because of the system. I wonder whether there's any way of adding, would be any way of adding some like categorisation to some of that, because then obviously that's exactly what you're saying. If it's the system, you would need to be looking at somebody with a similar system. If it's practice, then it's irrelevant what system you use really. If it's down to the fact that your business processes aren't great or your training isn't great, then there probably is more you can learn from other areas. But then what would that have a major impact on us as analysts? Probably not massively, but potentially more in terms of management and decision making and all that side of things.
Yeah, so quite a high impact. We have 4, 3, I don't know, put it, but it might be the ease of implementation, maybe a 2 or 3, like we'd have to build that probably.
I think they're quite easy.
Yeah,
We've kind of built it.
Yeah, we have.
This analysis here. It could be sort of a chat style tool.
Yeah.
Basically, your error reporting, your disclosure frequency, charts and stuff.
yeah, and at the first stage it'd probably just be Ollie creating Excel sheets and sending around an email.
But even without the benchmarking, we all said it, I think, in the last session, that even if you had the test site more regular, just that would be helpful, because then you have got those connections and you can just go ring somebody, but you've only got access to that once a year.
The test portal.
Yeah. So that if the test, a more frequent test portal went hand in hand with that benchmarking thing, that's where you.
Because that's where you
more
generate a lot of errors, right? That's where you generate a lot of clear error reports. That makes sense. Okay. Create a shared data cleaning tool set. So I'm assuming this would really only be for case management systems that are the same. So you're working on that extract. Would that be useful for an analyst?
I don't quite understand what you're proposing.
So I think this has come from the codes that have been written by some analysts and authorities to automatically clean some errors. So if they could exist as some kind of shared tool that anybody can use, for maybe different tools for different categories of error.
So you could share your extraction codes, and as you improve them and sort of take out errors a bit, you could share those publicly. Everyone could use the same extraction code, the same.
Yeah, that might be good. Again, it's relying on everyone on the same case management system.
Yeah.
And it's also relying on nobody bespoking anything, or at least not bespoking very much.
Almost like a common data model or something like that.
How many case management systems are there in the
Ah, that's a good question for Dan.
liquid logic with a team?
I mean, most people are on those two, aren't they?
Yes.
There's a bit of a tail, but I think 80% or something.
Yeah.
If you cover those two, then you've got most.
Yeah. That's interesting. So in terms of impact,
Should we all stand up at the same time?
Yeah.
What we say.
3, 2, 1.
Depends how,
That's one.
how bad one authority's code is compared to the others.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See the improvement.
Yeah.
I suspect we're all.
But I guess the question is if we like provided, or there was a set of like code or scripts that you just could get access to as an analyst to clean up these common errors in liquid logic. If you had that at that point, would that be valuable?
The argument with that is that we pay a lot of money for liquid logic, surely they should do it for us. That should be a standard report. If you've got a statutory requirement to meet,
Yeah.
that should be a standard piece of your off-the-shelf
Yeah.
package. So that's the argument we would get back, is why should we do it when we already pay?
Yeah. Yeah.
Do they have an extraction code for Library Logic?
They have a set of built before, yeah, we
Right.
use it, yeah.
No, 2 minutes here.
But without the test tab,
Uh,
it's sort of useless.
Yeah. So we're just in our last kind of minute here. I can sense some people outside. So one of the things that came up is, having a stronger culture on social workers entering data and making it easier for them. So having placement codes that are really clear. Do we think that would be valuable?
Yes.
Yes. I think that's maybe, I can't speak for the team, but maybe like a 4. Yeah. And how hard do you think that would be?
It's dead. I think it's dead.
I think that's quite easy. I think that's like a low case to print out. No worries. Thanks so much. Working with the DFE to make the data process a bit easier. So either allowing the portal to be open earlier, the schema, or allowing the feedback loop to be faster, because right now it takes 6 months to get kind of the benchmarking data back out. So maybe if that was looking into why that took so long and if it could be earlier. Would that be valuable? Is that annoying? Is that a problem? Like, is there issues with the DFE portal right now, or are we all happy with the way that operates?
Reasonable enough.
Sure. Yeah.
Finishing up.
I suppose it's reasonable enough. It would be helpful to have it open more often.
Yeah.
I mean, it is open most of the year round, but only to read from and download stuff from. You can't
Yeah.
deal with it and change data. If it was open a bit more, so we could load partial data for this year, for example. That might
Yeah. Okay. John, I think that's good. Yeah.
Yeah. Is there anything else that jumps out as potential sort of future bits of work we could do? We want to collaborate on something and take something forward that we could do to improve this process or stop those errors. Is there anything else got bubbling in your heads?
Almost feels like something that's sequential. Like if we can get, more regular testing, and we can learn from each other about the benchmarking, things like that, then practice comes next about shared business process.
All right. Looks like we're getting some interactions. So next steps. Ollie, do you want to?
Oh yeah, sorry, yeah, you can basically a few more interviews coming up tomorrow, Friday next week.
Who are you doing tomorrow? Is it a boo?
Yeah.
No, we're going to Stockpot
Yeah.
tomorrow. We're doing a boo on Friday. Got some
What day is it tomorrow? Thursday. Sorry, a boo's Friday. Sean and Paul Marshall Monday.
Yeah.
Good.
Lots of good interviews coming up. Next showdown in 2 weeks' time. Think more about decision-making questions they make, how they do it, what data they need. Look at the next blog. And the only other thing is, which is different, is it would be really good, as well as anything people to see a couple of decision-making meetings. How feasible is that kind of thing? So, placement decisions, or would we get out sort of shadow and sit in the corner quietly for one of those?
be just some paper that you might need to sign? Or
From just on that, from an IG point of view, I've said that social finance can sit and look at data as long as you're not sort of reviewing cases. So that should be okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Good.